The sky was changing, but no one knew it at first. People went about their normal lives. Kids played in parks, workers went to their jobs, and families gathered for dinners. The world felt the same as it always had. Yet far above, a new presence was growing, something no one had ever seen before. It started with strange signals picked up by space stations and observatories. At first, scientists thought it might be a natural event, a new star or a rare space storm. But the signals had a pattern, a message hidden inside the waves. Soon, the truth became impossible to ignore. A massive ship appeared near Earth's orbit. It was unlike anything humanity had built. It was huge, dark, and covered with strange symbols glowing faintly. This was no peaceful visitor. It was a warship, and it came with a demand. The ship sent a message, broadcast live to every screen on Earth. Its voice was cold and harsh, spoken in a language that was quickly translated by Earth's best computers. The message was simple. Humanity must surrender and serve the Zirac Dominion. If they refused, they would be destroyed. The Zirac Dominion was not a name people had heard before. But quickly the news poured in. They were a vast alien empire that had conquered hundreds of worlds across many galaxies. They ruled with an iron fist. To them, Earth was just another planet to control. Governments around the world scrambled. Leaders met in emergency sessions trying to decide what to do. Some argued for surrender to save lives. Others wanted to fight. Fear spread among the people, but so did anger. Among the chaos, most people thought this was the end. They expected their lives to change forever, that they would be forced to bow to an alien ruler. But not everyone felt that way. In the crowded cities and small towns and in quiet villages, a different feeling began to grow. It was a quiet fire of resistance. People who had been ignored or forgotten by society, those who had faced hardship, began to believe that they could fight back. They were ordinary people, farmers, factory workers, teachers, and students. But something inside them stirred. They refused to kneel. Even as the Zirac ship continued to loom in the sky, sending messages demanding obedience, secret groups formed. They talked in whispers, shared ideas, and made plans. They did not have advanced weapons or space fleets. They had only their courage, their will, and their hope. The world was on edge. The fear of destruction was real, but so was the hope of survival. People began to prepare for what no one wanted: war. They studied the alien messages for clues. They tried to find weaknesses. At the same time, some governments tried to make peace. They sent diplomats to open communication lines, hoping to buy time. But the Zirac showed no mercy. Their goal was total control. One night, everything changed. Without warning, the sky lit up with deadly beams of energy. The Zirac had begun their attack. Cities burned. Millions fled in panic. The world seemed to fall apart. People cried out for help, for a miracle. But in the ruins, in the shadows, the resistance grew stronger. Those ordinary people who had refused to bow now stood tall. They gathered what they could, and old weapons, tools, anything useful. They shared stories of bravery and loss. They promised to fight for their home, for their families, for the future. The world was broken, but humanity's spirit was not. The attacks came suddenly, like a nightmare no one could wake from. One moment the world was holding its breath, waiting for what might come next. The next, the skies exploded with fire and smoke. The alien ships did not hesitate. They struck with precision and power. Great cities that had stood for hundreds of years were torn apart in hours. Streets that had been full of life and laughter turned into ruins and ash. Buildings crumbled like sandcastles, and the night sky was filled with glowing embers. People ran for their lives, carrying what little they could. Mothers held children tightly. Fathers helped the elderly. The world was drowning in chaos and fear. No one knew where to go or what to do. The governments tried to respond, but they were unprepared. The alien ships had weapons beyond human understanding. Beams that could slice through steel. Explosions that could flatten entire neighborhoods. Military forces fought bravely, but it was like trying to stop a storm with bare hands. Millions died in those first days. Cities like Tokyo, Lagos, São Paulo, places once full of hope, were almost wiped from the map. The news was everywhere, showing scenes of destruction that broke hearts around the world. But even in the darkest times, hope began to shine. In the wreckage of broken buildings, small groups of people gathered. They were survivors, not just lucky but strong. They shared food, water, and stories. They helped the wounded. They made plans. Some found old bunkers and tunnels beneath the cities. These underground places became safe havens hidden from alien sensors and bombs. People who had been strangers became friends. They worked together to survive. Among these groups, a new kind of leader appeared, not someone chosen by a title or rank, but by courage and wisdom. These leaders didn't have fancy weapons or armies. They had something more important. They had the will to fight back. Scientists, engineers, and doctors joined them. They used their skills to fix broken machines, create new tools, and treat injuries. They worked day and night, knowing every moment counted. The resistance was not perfect. There were moments of fear, doubt, and loss. Some groups lost contact with each other. Supplies ran low. The alien patrols were always near. But every time the Zirek thought they had won, humans found a way to keep going. One of the most important secrets was Project Revenant. This was a hidden program started years ago, during the old Cold War, long before the aliens arrived. It was meant as a last resort, a plan to protect humanity if something terrible happened. Few people knew about Project Revenant. It was buried deep beneath the ice in Antarctica, inside a massive underground facility. When the aliens attacked, the facility was activated. Inside, a team of scientists and soldiers worked in silence. They had technology that was old and new mixed together. Old weapons upgraded with new energy sources. Computers that could think faster than any human brain, and experiments that tested the limits of biology and physics. They called themselves the Revenants, the ones who would come back from the edge of extinction. The team knew they couldn't defeat the aliens with force alone. They had to be smart, patient, and dangerous. They studied the Zirac ships, learning their patterns, their strengths, and their weaknesses. They watched every movement from the shadows. Meanwhile, above ground, the resistance continued to grow. People who had lost everything found a new purpose. They trained in secret, shared information, and built weapons from scrap metal and alien parts they had captured. Radio waves carried messages of hope and warning. Underground broadcasts told stories of bravery and survival. Every voice that spoke out became a spark in the darkness. Children who had seen too much death still dreamed of the stars. They learned about the universe from old books and data files saved on damaged servers. They imagined a future where Earth was safe again. Slowly, the resistance began to strike back. Small attacks targeted alien supply lines and patrols. They sabotaged communication towers and freed prisoners captured in the first assault. These attacks were dangerous and risky, but they gave people something they hadn't felt in a long time: control. The Zirek did not expect humanity to fight back with such spirit. They believed Earth would be easy to conquer, like all the other planets they had destroyed or enslaved. But they were wrong. Humanity was not ready to kneel. Every time the aliens tried to crush a rebel group, the survivors disappeared like smoke, only to return stronger elsewhere. Their spirit was like fire, impossible to put out. And deep beneath the ice, the Revenants prepared for a moment no one else could see yet. They knew the battle was far from over, but they believed humanity still had a chance. In the ruins of the fallen cities, a new world was being born. It was fragile, dangerous, and uncertain, but it was human. This was the story of survival, resistance, and hope, the story of how people refused to give up, even when the world was burning around them. After the terrible attacks, humanity had only one choice: to learn and fight back. The world was broken, but people refused to be broken inside. They knew that the aliens were powerful, but every power had its weak points. The key was to find them. In many hidden places, underground bunkers, abandoned research labs, and ruined cities, small groups of survivors collected pieces of alien technology left behind after battles or abandoned by patrols. Some of these pieces were strange machines. Others were weapons beyond human understanding. They looked different, but the people who studied them were determined. Scientists worked day and night. They were tired, scared, and worn out, but their minds stayed sharp. They had to figure out how the alien technology worked. It was like learning a new language without a dictionary. Sometimes it felt impossible, but they never gave up. One of the most surprising discoveries was the alien ship's quantum drive, the engine that let them travel faster than light. It was unlike any engine humans had ever seen. If they could figure out how it worked, they might be able to build ships that could follow the aliens beyond Earth. It was a hope no one wanted to lose. At the same time, doctors and biologists studied the alien biology. The Zirak were tough creatures, but they were not invincible. Their bodies had weaknesses. Some of the alien diseases didn't affect humans, and some human viruses could be dangerous to the aliens. Engineers took apart weapons and tools, trying to reverse engineer them, to build their own versions that humans could use. The materials were strange, but with time, they learned how to make small energy shields, powerful but portable weapons, and communication devices that could avoid alien detection. One of the most important helpers in this fight was a machine called Cassiel. Cassiel was an advanced artificial intelligence created by humans before the invasion. At first, Cassiel had been designed to help with space exploration and data management. But now Cassiel became a guide, a teacher, and a warrior. Cassiel studied the Zirak systems faster than any human could. It looked for patterns, weaknesses, and mistakes. It learned their tactics and shared the knowledge with human leaders. With Cassiel's help, humans discovered a crucial fact. The Zirak were powerful but proud. They trusted their technology and their strength too much. They didn't expect humans to fight smart or to use their own weaknesses against them. This was a turning point. In the hidden bases underground, a new kind of soldier was trained. They were called the Ashborn, people who had lost everything but found a new purpose in the fight. These soldiers were not just fighters, they were thinkers and survivors. They learned how to use the new weapons, how to move silently, and how to strike when the enemy least expected. The Ashborn were from all over the world. Some had been doctors, some engineers, some teachers. Now, they were united by one goal: to defend humanity and take the fight to the Zirak. They trained in secret places, old factories, tunnels beneath ruined cities, and deep underground bunkers. Their training was hard. They had to learn new ways of fighting against an enemy that could kill from a distance or wipe out entire groups with a single blast. But the Ashborn were determined. They were fighting not just for themselves but for everyone left on Earth, and for those who would come after. While the Ashborn prepared, the scientists worked harder to create better weapons and defenses. They combined human technology with alien tech, making new machines that could block energy blasts or move faster in space. Even in the darkest moments, stories of bravery and hope spread. Radio broadcasts told of small victories: a group of rebels saving a town, an Ashborn unit destroying an alien supply ship, or a scientist discovering a new way to fight the enemy. These stories kept people going. They reminded everyone that humanity was not just fighting for survival. They were fighting for a future where people could live freely. At the same time, some humans began to question the future. What would happen if the Zirak were defeated? Would humans become like their enemies? Would they take control of other planets and rule with force? These questions were difficult, but important. The leaders of the resistance promised to remember why they fought, not for power but for freedom and peace. The time was coming when humanity would no longer hide in the shadows. They would rise, not as victims, but as warriors. And when they did, the galaxy would see something new, a force born from pain, hope, and unbreakable will. The day finally came when humanity decided it was time to fight back. For months, people had hidden, learned, and prepared. They had taken what they needed from the ruins of their old world and the scraps of alien technology they found. They trained in secret and planned carefully. Now they would show the Zirak that humans were not weak, that they would not bow. The first target was Vallis Prime, a distant planet that the Zirak had turned into a military base. It was far from Earth, but close enough to be important. This planet was a key place where the Zirak built their weapons and gathered their armies. If the humans could strike there, they could slow the enemy down and send a message. Humanity was fighting back. The Ashborn were ready. They boarded the ships built from reverse-engineered alien parts, engines powered by human-made quantum drives. These ships were not as big or strong as Zirak warships, but they were fast and clever. They moved like shadows through space, avoiding patrols and hidden sensors. When they arrived at Vallis Prime, the sky was dark with the shadow of huge alien towers and ships. The Ashborn waited for the perfect moment. Then, without warning, they struck. Energy torpedoes made from stolen technology and human design tore through the alien defenses. Explosions lit up the skies like fireworks, but these were deadly fireworks. The humans moved quickly, targeting power stations, communication arrays, and supply lines. On the ground, teams of Ashborn soldiers landed in small pods, hidden by smoke and darkness. They moved silently through alien bases, disabling weapons and freeing prisoners taken from Earth and other worlds. The attacks were not easy. The Xerac fought back fiercely. They had better weapons and numbers. But the Ashborn had something even more powerful. They had hope and determination. Every small victory pushed them forward. The people of Vallis Prime had never seen anything like it. They were used to conquering planets with ease, but the humans were different. They fought with heart and intelligence. They used the aliens' own technology against them, turning their strength into weakness. The Resistance sent messages back to Earth, broadcast across space. They told of their battles, their losses, and their successes. These messages inspired people everywhere. They gave hope to those still hiding in the ruins and the tunnels beneath destroyed cities. Other alien species, those who had suffered under the Xerac rule for years, heard these broadcasts. They saw that humans could fight. They began to whisper about rebellion. For many, it was the first time in a long time they felt hope. With each new attack, the Resistance grew stronger. They learned from every fight. They improved their weapons and tactics. No longer were they just defending. Now they were leading the charge. But this new strength came with challenges. The Xerac realized Earth was no longer an easy target. They sent more ships, more soldiers, and more weapons to fight the humans. The battles became bigger and more dangerous. In the middle of this chaos, the Ashborn became legends. Their bravery and skill inspired stories that spread through the underground networks. People listened to their radio broadcasts, hoping to hear about the latest missions and victories. The Ashborn were not superheroes. They were ordinary people pushed to the edge, facing fear and loss every day. But they kept going. They fought because they believed in something greater, the freedom to live without fear. Behind the scenes, the scientists continued their work. They used data from battles to improve their weapons and defenses. Every captured ship or device was studied carefully. Even small discoveries could change the tide of the war. The AI Cassiel became more than just a tool. It became a symbol of the fight for humanity. It helped plan missions, analyze enemy movements, and communicate with scattered groups of rebels across the galaxy. Together, humans and Cassiel formed a team that could think faster than the Xerac expected. They found ways to outsmart the enemy, striking where they were weakest. The Resistance's success on Vallis Prime was just the beginning. It showed the galaxy that the Xerac Empire was not unstoppable. It gave new hope to all those under the Dominion's rule. As the war grew, more and more alien species joined the fight. They shared their knowledge, their weapons, and their courage. The humans were no longer alone. The fight was far from over. Many worlds were still under Xerac control. Many people were still suffering. But now the fire of rebellion burned brighter than ever, and through it all humanity's message was clear. They would never kneel. They would stand and fight no matter the cost. The fire that started on Earth was spreading across the stars. The Xerac Dominion had ruled countless worlds for centuries, but now everywhere they looked they saw rebellion rising, and at the center of this storm stood humanity. The news of Earth's resistance, the victories of the Ashborn, and the bold attacks on Xerac planets had reached far beyond the human homeworld. Other species, long under the Dominion's harsh rule, began to hear about these stories. Many had lost hope, believing that no one could stand up to the Xerac. But now humanity's courage gave them a new reason to believe. Small groups of rebels started to appear on many planets. They were made up of different species, cultures, and backgrounds. They all shared one thing, a desire for freedom. They had been waiting for a spark to ignite their own fight. Humans became that spark. The Resistance became more than just a human movement. It grew into a galactic rebellion, a shared fight for liberty. Human operatives traveled to distant worlds not as conquerors but as teachers. They trained the rebels, shared weapon designs, and exchanged knowledge about the Xerac. The alliance was not easy. Different species had different ways of fighting and different beliefs. There were disagreements and struggles to work together. But the common goal was stronger than their differences. They learned to trust one another, building bonds through battle and shared sacrifice. Together they planned coordinated attacks. Human forces and alien rebels struck Xerac supply lines, communication networks, and military bases. These attacks disrupted the Dominion's control and forced them to spread their forces thinner. The Xerac grew angry and desperate. They sent their strongest fleets and deadliest soldiers to crush the rebellion. Battles became larger and more violent. Entire planets became battlefields. Cities were destroyed and countless lives were lost. But the rebels fought with determination. They had hope, and that hope was their greatest weapon. Every time they lost a battle, they learned from it. Every time they were pushed back, they found new ways to fight. The war was changing the galaxy. Old empires and alliances watched from the sidelines, some fearful, some curious. The human rebellion was proving that even the most powerful empire could be challenged. On Earth, the people listened to the stories of these distant battles with pride and sorrow. They knew many would not return, but they also knew their fight was not in vain. They were part of something much bigger than themselves. The Ashborn continued their role as the front line of the fight. Their missions took them to new worlds, where they helped rebels organize and defend their homes. They became symbols of hope and courage to many species. Meanwhile, the scientists and engineers back on Earth and in hidden bases across the galaxy worked tirelessly. They developed new weapons, defenses, and ships to support the growing rebellion. Cassiel, the AI, connected all the rebel groups, helping to coordinate attacks and share information quickly. Even as the war raged on, the rebels held on to their values. They did not want to become like the Xerac, ruling through fear and force. They dreamed of a galaxy where different species could live together in peace, respecting each other's freedom and culture. This dream was what kept them fighting. The Xerac Dominion was still powerful, but their control was slipping. The rebellion was spreading like wildfire, and the galaxy was waking up from a long nightmare. Every victory, every freed planet, was a step closer to the day when no one would have to kneel to the Xerac again. The fight was far from over. But the rebels, human and alien alike, were no longer alone. Together, they were writing a new story for the galaxy, a story of freedom, unity, and hope. The war had lasted longer than anyone expected. Years of fighting had changed the galaxy forever. Planets were scarred, cities were in ruins, and countless lives had been lost. But through all the pain and sacrifice, one thing remained clear. Humanity, along with their allies, would never give up. The final battle was approaching. The Xerac Dominion had gathered its greatest fleet near the heart of their empire, a massive star system that was the center of their power. If the Xerac could win this battle, they would crush the rebellion once and for all. But the rebels, led by humanity and their allies, had a different plan. They would take the fight to the enemy's doorstep and end the war on their terms. The Ashborn, the brave soldiers of Earth, prepared for the mission of their lives. They knew it would be dangerous, many would not return, but they were ready. They fought for every person who dreamed of freedom, for every child who deserved a safe world, and for every soul lost along the way. The battle began with a storm of fire and light. Spaceships clashed in the darkness of space, lasers cutting through the void, explosions lighting up the stars. The rebels fought with everything they had: courage, strategy, and unity. On the ground, human and alien forces worked together, infiltrating enemy bases, sabotaging weapons, and freeing prisoners. Every step was hard-won, every victory a miracle. Cassiel, the AI who had guided the rebellion, coordinated the fight with precision. It analyzed enemy movements, predicted their attacks, and helped the rebels adapt quickly. Despite the Xerac's power and numbers, the rebels held their ground. The spirit of hope and freedom was stronger than any weapon. They fought not just for survival, but for a future where no one would live in fear. Slowly, the tide turned. The Xerac leaders saw their empire crumbling. They tried to retreat, but the rebels were relentless. They pressed forward, pushing the enemy back to their last stronghold. At the heart of the empire, a final confrontation took place. It was not just a battle of weapons, but a battle of wills. The Xerac demanded submission, but humanity refused. In the end, it was the unity of all the rebels that made the difference. Different species, different cultures fighting side by side for the same dream: freedom. When the dust settled, the Xerac Dominion was broken. The empire that had ruled through fear and violence was no more. The galaxy began to heal. New governments formed based on cooperation and respect. Worlds that had been enemies before learned to trust each other. The rebels who had fought together now worked to rebuild their homes and their lives. Humanity played a key role in this new beginning. They did not seek power or control. Instead, they helped create a council where all species could have a voice. They shared their knowledge and technology to help rebuild. The scars of war would never fully disappear, but the hope for a better future was stronger than ever. Children grew up hearing stories of bravery and sacrifice. They learned about the price of freedom and the importance of standing up against oppression. The story of humanity, the story of a species that refused to kneel, became a legend across the stars. It was a reminder that even in the darkest times, hope could burn bright. And as the stars shone above, the people of the galaxy looked forward to a new era, one where they could live without fear, where their differences were a strength, and where freedom was a right for all. The war was over, but the story of humanity's courage and unity would live on forever.